Okay, so hello Poppy and welcome. I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
As I said before, making venues as accessible as possible. So all the standard, making sure there's ramps, obviously accessible loos, disabled parking places. Ideally, if you have a room that can be used for people with sensory issues, so they can take a break without having to go outside or whatever if it's particularly cold, that's always nice. But I'm aware Acalia is noisy by nature of what it is. Yeah, and then moving on sort of to things if you're calling in, I don't know, historical buildings where accessibility is not possible, as long as you warn people what the barriers will be, they can make the decision for themselves if they want to still attend. At the end of the day, that's not on you. You can't change a castle, to magically have a lift. I completely understand that. And also, the same goes to calling at festivals in a field. Great if there's boards down, there usually is, but the grass, accessible loos, etc. That's not on you. That's on the festival. Yeah, okay. And then moving on to if you're calling a ceilidh, let's say at a wedding, and one of the guests there is disabled and you didn't know about it before. If you see someone with a visible disability, so let's say a wheelchair user, for example, it is okay to go up and say, hey, what are your access needs? This person might not know, they might not have been to a ceilidh before, or they'll go, yeah, please tell me if you're going to do a strip the willow, if a change partners. They, often want to know that sort of thing. However, what isn't appropriate is going, oh, well, what's wrong with you then? Or, oh, you're too young. You don't look disabled, which I know might sound a bit backwards and a bit obvious to kind of say to people, but that sort of response is kind of more common than it should be, let's say. Another thing, if you start calling and you realise someone's struggling and you're thinking, oh, I want them to be able to dance a bit more. Obviously, this one seems a bit more difficult for them. If there's an interval or whatever, it's okay to go and ask, is XYZ type of dance easier for you? Yeah. And then I suppose how you should be calling dances to sort of start off with. By that I mean is making sure you haven't covered your lips, because a lot of people lip read. So that can be an initial challenge. Making sure you mention that it's okay, you don't have to touch anyone if you don't want to. I think consent in ceilidh calling is definitely missing. And yeah, some people don't want to be touched, and that's fine. Also mentioning whether or not you change partners, because that can be quite challenging, especially for people with various different neurodiversities and dementia and things like that. That can be quite a struggle for them. And then, so just trying to make sure I've mentioned all I was trying to mention. Yeah, and then giving the name of the dance is something that always really helps me, because I'm a caller myself. I know whether or not I then have the energy to do that dance, or if I don't know it, I'll go up to the caller and say, does this have an XYZ in it, or what type of dance is this? So moves like a strip the willow, whether or not it's a square dance, circle dance, because people often forget and they just say, okay, so many couples up, and that's great and that's fine. But when you get there and then you realise, oh, for whatever reason I can't do this one, it's really awkward to then be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave now. To kind of do that. And then moving on to kind of which dances to call. I recommend for people with mobility issues square dances, because they often have the least amount of movement in them. Circle dances are quite difficult because you cover quite a lot of ground and you often change partners, so that can be quite challenging. And again, things like I mentioned before, strip the willow, grand chain for some people. Yeah, and I mean, the big thing is kind of willingness to adapt. So if someone says, oh, I'd really like to do this, but I don't think I can get, round in time. If you can say, okay, well, you could do half of that movement, or instead of a swing, you could just meet at someone's shoulders and step back, because, as long as they're back to place in time, it's fine. Same with if someone's sitting on the edge and physically can only really sit down in a chair, doesn't want to be in a wheelchair, etc. You can still adapt a dance for them. It won't look the same as everyone else, but it doesn't mean they're not dancing. So, if you say a right hand swing, if they're able to use their hands, you could get them to twirl their hands, you can get them to, and someone else as a partner with them, they can still join in. They might feel a bit awkward at first, but I think, like a lot of people when they first try ceilidh dancing, when you kind of let go of that nervousness and sort of worriedness, they just kind of get into it and enjoy it.